Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to another book review from me, Logan Albright, your humble narrator and book reviewer. Today, I'm continuing my long and arduous journey through the complete works of Shakespeare, which I have here in this nice leather-bound volume from Barnes& Noble. You know, Barnes& Noble, not a prestige publisher, not like Easton Press or anything like that, or Folio Society, but they put out these nice leather-bound copies with complete works in them, and they're with gold foil on the side, and they're like 20 bucks. It's a pretty good deal, I think. So even though I don't think there are any Barnes& Nobles left in my part of the country, they're all gone online. I have a few of these, and I think they're kind of nice. But on with the Shakespeare. I've been wanting to read more Shakespeare. As people who have been watching this series will know, I am not a big fan of his. I never have been. I've never really enjoyed the Shakespeare plays I've seen performed. But I wanted to learn more about him and become more well-versed in his bibliography, because he's such a huge part of Western culture, and there's so many references to his work, and there's so many cliches and even words that are drawn from his work that I thought, I really should read all the plays. It's not just enough to see them performed, and there's, only a handful you actually see performed. The rest you just never see. So I thought I'd read through all of them. They're not in any particular order. I think this edition roughly tries to arrange them in chronological order, but it's not really very accurate or well known even what order they originally were written in. So I'm reading through all of it, and this week I read 3 more plays. I read A Love's Labor is Lost, Romeo and Juliet, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. I'm kind of getting into the more famous plays now, which is good. And I'm getting into ones that I enjoy more. I'm finding myself getting a little bit more out of them, and I think it's because the quality of the plays is improving rather than I'm getting used to his writing or anything like that. So first of all, Love's Labor is Lost. It's a comedy, and it concerns this king and his attendants who have decided to basically set up a university and swear off the company of women in order to study for a few years to become wise and intelligent and well-educated. And that immediately goes out the window when some beautiful women come to visit. And then there's this whole mistaken identity, exchange of letters, typical Shakespeare comedy plot. Plot is nothing really to speak of, but I kind of enjoyed this one. This is, I would say, the first Shakespeare comedy that I have gotten some pleasure out of, because I find the plots of all of these comedies ridiculous. I don't really like any of them, but in this case, the wordplay is pretty good. There's a lot of very elaborate punning that goes on in this book, and so it's very densely written. It's a little bit hard to read sometimes, a little bit hard to understand, and I don't get all the references, obviously, because it's 400, 500-year-old play at this point. But I thought the wordplay was really well done and very clever. So I kind of enjoyed Love's Labor is Lost from that reason alone. There really wasn't much else to get out of it. It's a pretty simple and straightforward comedy, but the language was quite inventive, and I enjoyed that. Moving on to Romeo and Juliet. This is, of course, Shakespeare's most famous play, barring perhaps Hamlet, but I'd say Romeo and Juliet is more famous. I've seen it performed a number of times, and so I'm familiar with the story. I've seen movie adaptations of it, obviously, but going in and actually reading the written word, you miss things when you see it live, and so that was enjoyable to me. There's so many common expressions and cliches that are drawn from this play. There's that which we call it rose by any other name would smell as sweet. There's parting is such sweet sorrow. All these lines that, we always hear now, and we talk about, oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. These are really well-known quotations, so that was interesting. One of the things I found upon reading it that I never really got before is, there's this notion that Romeo and Juliet is the great love story of star-crossed lovers, and it's the most romantic story ever told, and it's, so idealistic and pure, and it shows these, these two warring houses coming together at the end over the loss of their children, and it's such a sincere and romantic play, and it's, adapted into West Side Story and has been used over and over again as an example of two people who are really desperately in love. They're Romeo and Juliets. I found the play a little bit more cynical than I remembered it being. A lot of the characters are kind of dismissive of Romeo and Juliet's love and make kind of snide comments about how, Romeo was formerly in love with this other character, Rosalind, and then he immediately drops her as soon as he sees Juliet. They're like 14 years old or 13 years old in this, so they're not really mature enough to have these kind of, deeply held feelings. And a lot of the characters comment on that, about how they're fickle and they're just, kids and they don't know what they're talking about. And this is not really love. This is just youthful, puppy love, attraction kind of thing. And so I was surprised to see how kind of not sincere. A lot of the play is about the love aspect of it. They're not like, these are the greatest lovers of all time. It's like, these are two stupid kids who don't know what they're doing, but they're, wrapped up in their hormones, and they're really just, think they feel something they don't really feel. So I thought that was interesting, although, it does have kind of a sincere conclusion with, the two houses coming together. And I think that there is romance in it, but it's a little bit less idealistically and naively romantic as I thought it was. It's a little bit knowing wink towards the folly of young love, which I thought was interesting. I wasn't really expecting that. So yeah, I kind of liked Romeo and Juliet, although it's not my favorite so far. It has its pluses and its minuses. It's okay. It's a little bit, I guess it's hard to evaluate, critically now because it's such a cliche story and you've heard it so many times. But I thought it was pretty good. But Midsummer Night's Dream was the last one I read, and this is actually my favorite of the plays that I've read of Shakespeare so far. I really liked it, and I don't know if that has to do with the plot, or if it has to do with the language, or if it has to do with the poetry. I really like things that have, fairies and spirits and magic in them. So that's, I'm sure, a large part of why I like it. I also have this, attraction to the incidental music that was written for it by Mendelssohn. And so I kind of had that going in my head, this kind of sprightly, beautiful, romantic music going along with it. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. It's a pretty simple plot. Again, it's another comedy. It's about these people who love each other, and it's Hermia and Lysander are in love with each other. It's like a love quadrangle. And then there's Helena and Demetrius. And Demetrius loves Hermia, but Helena loves Demetrius. And Hermia's father is demanding that she marry Demetrius instead of Lysander, who she loves. And they all run out into the woods to try to get away from this crazy situation. And while they're there, they encounter some fairies, and the fairies decide to play a joke on them. They sprinkle dust in their lovers' eyes so that they will fall in love with the first person they wake up and see. And this is very reminiscent of like a Gilbert and Sullivan plot, which I know it goes the other way around. Gilbert and Sullivan drew from Shakespeare. But I really like Gilbert and Sullivan, so I'm kind of enjoying that kind of silly plot. And then, of course, there's mistakes made, and everybody falls in love with the wrong person. And then the weird thing about it is there's this whole side plot about these tradesmen, crafters, who are putting on a play for the king. And they go out in the woods to rehearse. And they get all mixed up in this too. And one of them, whose name is Bottom, gets his head turned into a donkey's head by one of the fairies as a joke, and he ends up the fairy queen Titania falls in love with him. And this is like the first time a Shakespeare comedy has actually made me laugh, because it's so stupid and so ridiculous. This whole scene of the fairy queen being in love with this guy with the donkey head, I thought it was actually really funny. And then so that all ties into it too. But it's a very strange plot because everything gets wrapped up by the end of Act 3. Like all the main plot lines, and there's not really, like, the drama doesn't really work because everybody falls in love with the wrong person, and then the fairies are like, oh no, everybody fell in love with the wrong person, we better fix that. And then they fix it, and everything's fine. And that's like the end of Act 3, and everything's back to normal the way it was. There's not really any like dramatic arc. It's just like there's a mistake made, and then the mistake is immediately corrected. And then like Act 4 and 5 is these players putting on their stupid play kind of ineptly for the king, and then the king and his wife and his family like making fun of it as they watch it. And that's the end of the play, which I thought was really strange, because like the main plot of the play gets wrapped up 2/3 of the way through, and then the rest of it is this performance, which is just, again, I found the performance funny because it's making fun of kind of inept performers, and I liked the sarcastic commentary on it by the king and his family. I thought it was really good, but it's strange. It's dramatically strange. Like if someone pitched this plot to me, I would say it doesn't really work because there's no stakes, nothing really like changes. Oh, the other thing about it is that like they go back after all this has happened to Athens. And everything's just like the whole obstacle that made them go into the woods in the first place is just forgotten about. They're like, oh yeah, I don't care who you marry now. Like the whole reason they had to go out in the woods is that the father was forcing Hermia to marry Demetrius. And after they go through all this stuff, they get back and the father's like, I don't care anymore. Marry whoever you want. And so like the whole reason for the plot just goes away for no reason. It just vanishes, like unmotivated by anything. So like, dramatically it doesn't really work, but I found it funny, and I found the setting interesting, and I found the characters interesting, and the poetry's nice. So I really liked A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I'm expecting to like more of the Shakespeare plays that have magic in them, like Macbeth or The Tempest. I think those are the ones that I'm going to enjoy the most. So that's my thoughts on the 3 Shakespeare plays that I read this time. I will come back later when I have read more plays. There's the next ones is like, I think King John is the next one on my list. So there's some histories coming up. We'll see how those go. So far, I have generally preferred the histories to the comedies and the tragedies. But I find them interesting because I'm learning stuff about history that I didn't know. But apart from A Midsummer's Night's Dream, which is a comedy, I like that one best. But so far, I've generally preferred the histories. So we'll see if that continues to be the case as I get further into the plays of Shakespeare and see kind of, you know, how his style develops as he gets older and he becomes more experienced. But those are my thoughts for now. Going to keep going through the complete works of Shakespeare. As you can see from my bookmark, I have a long way to go yet. But I will keep plugging away, and I'll report back when I have a few more plays under my belt and let you know. In the meantime, why don't you like the video, comment on it, let me know what you think of these plays or which Shakespeare plays are your favorite. I'd love to hear your comments, and I'll respond. And then subscribe to the channel. I always like good subscriptions. It's so nice when people subscribe. It's just a friendly thing to do, and you want to be friendly, don't you? I thought you did. Thank you for watching. I've been your host, Logan Albright, and I'll catch you next time.